None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade.
It
was important for us to meet as quickly as possible after last night's announcements from President Trump, which are a shock to international trade, not just for the European Union and France, but fundamentally for the proper functioning of global commerce. The list that was released last night is particularly concerning for several of our overseas territories and will require special mobilization from both the government and the economic sector to support them. I am thinking, for instance, of Réunion and Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon, which appear to have been subjected to exorbitant tariffs. The scale of the impact is unprecedented. However, what I want to emphasize at the beginning of this meeting is that the real extent and negative consequences will primarily be felt by the American economy itself. One thing is certain. With last night's decisions, the U.S. economy, its businesses and citizens, will emerge weaker and poorer than before.
Porque no es cierto que la Unión Europea aplique aranceles del 39% a Estados Unidos.
This is what I would like to emphasize. It is contrary to the truth, because it is not true that the European Union applies tariffs of 39% to the United States. Isn't it true? In fact, if we look at the figures, the European Union only applies tariffs of around 3% depending on the case. So it is not 39%, it is around 3%. And it is not true that our trade relationship is unbalanced. I am not talking about Spain, which you know much better than I do. The trade balance between the European Union and the United States in goods and services is practically on par. The tariffs announced by President Trump are therefore not reciprocal. Their supposed reciprocity, in my opinion, it is just an excuse to punish countries, apply sterile protectionism and raise revenue to try to mitigate the deficit that a fiscal policy is causing. In my opinion, more than questionable. Therefore, no one will benefit from this. The trade war will affect the whole world, including Europe, but it will affect those who provoked it the most. That is why we again ask President Trump to come to his senses, to sit down at the negotiating table with the European Union and also with the rest of the world. The European Union must react, as we have always defended from the government of Spain, with proportionality, with unity and with the strength that comes from being the way we are. An extraordinary trading bloc, the first trading bloc in the world. On this basis, I am informing you that today we are going to deploy our plan, which we have called the Trade Response and Relaunch Plan, designed to mitigate the negative impacts of this trade war initiated by the Trump administration, and weave a shield to protect our economy. So that if the storm finally breaks, Spain will have a double umbrella, the European umbrella and the Spanish umbrella. This plan will mobilize a total of 14.1 billion euros. 14.1 billion euros, of which 7.4 billion euros are new financing, and another 6.7 billion euros will be used from existing instruments to promote different measures, and we are going to articulate them in two main pillars. The situation is complex. It is difficult. The trade war opened by President Trump is terrible news for the world. It is also for the United States and, of course, it is also for Europe and, consequently, also for Spain. Because this tariff attack by the U.S. administration does not distinguish between friend and foe, does not discriminate by ideology or trade balance. It goes against everyone and everything, against everyone and everything.
Einheitlich geschlossen reagiert und dass Sie mit Ihrer Reaktion auch.
It is necessary for the European Union to react with unity and to make it clear in its reaction what is the case. Namely that the European Union is the largest single market in the world and that we, therefore, have every opportunity to react with unity and determination and to show that we ourselves have instruments for action. They will also be used. But at the same time, of course, it is important that the things we do create the basis for reaching an understanding as quickly as possible. It is obvious that even if Europe did nothing, this would lead to economic difficulties in the United States. Higher import prices for the United States of America are then the problem. The industrial development of the USA is being hampered by the tariffs that the USA itself has decided to impose, and the export capability of the USA is being brought into difficulties by the tariffs that the USA has decided to impose. These are all economic theorems. You can read about it in all the international findings on such customs conflicts for 100 years. But we will certainly not be able to limit ourselves to saying that this is harmful. It's like harming yourself, it will go away on its own. You have to show that you have strong muscles. But this is actually with the aim of reaching an understanding. Because that is the best thing for prosperity in the USA, for prosperity in Europe, and for the prosperity of the world. I would like to say this again. We have come to realize with many products that there are sometimes so many supply chain relationships for some products. Things are transported back and forth across borders 100 times. You can't simply resolve that. As a result, there are considerable economic difficulties and some things can no longer be produced properly. And that is why this is simply a serious economic mistake. The one who harms the USA without anyone doing anything. Nevertheless, the EU will act, but it will act wisely. And that is what we stand for. The aim is to return to a time when fair trade in the world enables us to prosper together.
President Trump's announcement of universal tariffs on the whole world, including the European Union, is a major blow to the world economy. I deeply regret this choice. Let's be clear-eyed about the immense consequences. The global economy will massively suffer. Uncertainty will spiral and trigger the rise of further protectionism. The consequences will be dire for millions of people around the globe, also for the most vulnerable countries, which are now subject to some of the highest US tariffs. The opposite of what we wanted to achieve. The tariffs will also hurt consumers around the world. It will be felt immediately. Millions of citizens will face higher grocery bills. Medication will cost more, as well as transportation. Inflation will go up. And this is hurting in particular the most vulnerable citizens. All businesses, big and small, will suffer from day one. From greater uncertainty, to the disruption of supply chains, to burdensome bureaucracy. The costs of doing business with the United States will drastically increase. And what is more, there seems to be no order in the disorder, no clear path through the complexity and chaos that is being created as all US trading partners are hit. In the past 80 years, trade between the European Union and the United States has created millions of jobs. Consumers across the Atlantic have benefited from reduced prices. Businesses have benefited from huge opportunities, leading to unprecedented growth and prosperity. And at the same time, we know that the global trading system has serious deficiencies. I agree with President Trump that others are taking unfair advantage of the current rules, and I'm ready to support any efforts to make the global trading system fit for the realities of the global economy. But I also want to be clear. Reaching for tariffs as your first and last tool will not fix it. This is why, from the outset, we have always been ready to negotiate with the United States to remove the remaining barriers to transatlantic trade. At the same time, we are prepared to respond. We are already finalizing the first package of countermeasures in response to tariffs on steel, and we're now preparing for further countermeasures to protect our interests and our businesses if negotiations fail. We will also be watching closely what indirect effects these tariffs could have, because we cannot absorb global overcapacity, nor will we accept dumping on our markets. As Europeans, we will always promote and defend our interests and our values, and we will always stand up for Europe. But there is an alternative path. It is not too late to address concerns through negotiations. This is why our Trade Commissioner, Maroš Šefčovič, is permanently engaged with his US counterparts. We will work towards reducing barriers, not raising them. I know that many of you feel let down by our oldest ally. Yes, we must brace for the impact that this will inevitably have. Europe has everything it needs to make it through the storm. We are in this together. If you take on one of us, you take on all of us. So we will stand together and stand up for each other. Our unity is our strength. Europe has the largest single market in the world, 450 million consumers. That is our safe harbor in tumultuous times. And Europe will stand at the side of those directly impacted. We have already announced new measures to support the steel and cars sectors. Last week, we limited the amount of steel that can be imported to Europe tariff-free. This will give more breathing space to these strategic industries. Now, we will also convene strategic dialogues with the steel, the automotive and the pharmaceutical sectors, and others will follow. Europe stands together for our business, for our citizens, and for all Europeans, and we will continue to build bridges with all those that, like us, care about fair and rules-based trade as a basis for shared prosperity. Thank you.